Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the CoinRock Show. On today's episode, we have a very, very interesting conversation. We were just talking about this off camera because we're going to be talking about Bitcoin. And I think when people think about Bitcoin, they just think about buying and hodling Bitcoin on their phone app or any brokerage. But there's much more to it. So we have Phil Geiger here on the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here and always happy to talk about Bitcoin.
Yeah. No, we have a lot to cover. So the way we do these shows, I do a quick intro based on the official intro we have. It's short usually, and then the floor is yours. Go ahead, give a lot more context about who you are, what you do. So the official bio is Phil has been advocating for Bitcoin since 2014 as an early Unchained employee 11, I believe.
That's right.
He helped grow the company from a small startup to securing over 100,000 Bitcoin in collaborative custody. Now he focuses on working with companies to establish corporate Bitcoin treasuries and advising Bitcoin startups. That's the gist of it. Tell us more. How did you discover Bitcoin? And tell us your story.
Well, for me, the first time I learned about Bitcoin was mostly an accident. But what was nice about that accidental moment was that I had a lot of the puzzle pieces in place in advance. So I graduated university with a degree in economics, Keynesian economics, but
Yep.
they call it economics. And I moved, very quickly into tech. That was my first job was software implementation,
Yep.
and that job required a lot of communicating tough technical solutions to folks who were not super technical.
Yep.
And I was just in the right place at the right time. I was watching a presentation at a bar in 2014, and the presenter was giving a brief history of money. And she ended the presentation with the introduction of Bitcoin. And I'd always been curious about money
Mm,
and how it never really seemed to make that much sense to me. But this presentation really put the pieces together. And I
yep.
very quickly bought Bitcoin after that, then fell deeply down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. So I was still working in software, healthcare software until about 2017, where I
Yep.
left and moved full time into Bitcoin, advising startups early on, and then joining Unchained very early to help grow their vault product, their custody product.
Yep. How so honestly, it's very rare to have someone talk about Bitcoin, actually teach Bitcoin. What year was this when you had someone actually explain and was it in class? Was it after graduating?
It was after I had graduated. I
Yep.
believe the presenter was still a student. It was in Madison, Wisconsin, and it was very randomly at a bar. So some of
Yep.
the bars in Madison do events called Nerd Night, where
Yep.
students, presenters can come up and give essentially a mini TED talk about any
Yep.
topic. And
Interesting.
the this woman, yeah, just gave a talk about the history of money and ended on Bitcoin. And yeah, I wonder how many people in the audience like ended up acting on that at that time. I always think about
Oh
that
yeah.
because it was so early on, and this person was extremely proficient at explaining the puzzle pieces. So
Yep.
the history of money, how it evolved, and then why Bitcoin uh, exists and why it solves a really critical problem for humanity. So
Yep.
yeah, it was just kind of luck that
Mm,
I had that exposure. I think I almost certainly heard of Bitcoin before that,
yep.
but in my mind, it sounded like, you know, World of Warcraft gold or
Yep.
something, but
Same.
without a
Same for
video
me. I
game
I
attached
I,
to
di-
it. I
I
was like,
did
why would
not
I?
understand
Yeah,
it initially. Yeah.
yeah. Why would I want to, have this money that I can't
Yep.
do any, quote unquote, do anything with? And it
Yep.
took a couple repeated exposures. And I know you're in marketing, and so a lot of times with marketing, it takes six or
Oh
seven
yeah.
touch
Oh yeah.
points, maybe sometimes even more, and hitting people from different angles with different emotional messages. But I was primed, and at that point, just was able to really uh, understand it and
Yep.
dive deep quickly into the technicals and how to secure it, how to buy it, how to self custody, and from then on, I was doing a lot of writing and consulting with small businesses, and then went full time with Unchained.
So you pretty much believed quickly in Bitcoin
Yeah, I
when you
think
heard the concept?
yeah,
Yeah.
so the reason that I believe quickly in it is because uh, the presenter gave a history of money. So it
Mm.
very, it's kind of a joke in Bitcoin to start with the Isle of Yap and
Yeah.
the gigantic rye stones
Yeah.
that exist on Yap, and that's where she started. And she went through the history of money, talking about the problems of paper money, talking about the evolution of kind of gold, the emergence of the gold standard, and then the problems with gold. And then she ended on how Bitcoin solves the problems of gold and, you know, essentially the discovery of something that was perfectly scarce,
Yeah.
finitely scarce with a supply of 21 million. And I sat on it for a little while, a few days, but I was like, just thinking about this idea of like, hey,
Yeah.
if somebody has discovered, a digital scarcity, what's amazing about things that are digital is it's, binary, right? It's
Yeah.
either
Yeah.
scarce or not scarce in a lot of ways. And and the implications of that, I think, are still being discovered to this day. And it's kind of amazing. When I first started buying a little bit of Bitcoin, I got
Yeah.
most of my information from Reddit, r Bitcoin, which
Yeah.
is still pretty active. It has an active community, but the I think the real information moved over to like Twitter,
Yeah.
and some of the other platforms. But at the time, that's where I was getting my information, Reddit. And you know, any major news article would cause the
Yeah.
price of Bitcoin to
Oh
move
yeah. Yeah.
by
Yeah. Yeah.
5,
Yeah.
10,
Yeah. I remember.
15%,
Yeah.
and it was,
Yeah.
CNBC was talking about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Um, and it's pretty amazing to see that in, just over 10 years now, we have nation states adopting Bitcoin.
Yeah.
We have major companies going all in and creating kind of black
Yeah.
holes of Wall Street to absorb
Yep.
capital into Bitcoin. And the price, while the price is extremely high, it's way higher than I
Yeah. Yeah.
really ever anticipated it would be this
What was the
quickly.
price the first time you found Bitcoin? Like that day? Do you remember?
Yeah, so it was about $475. It was
Yeah.
the Mount Gox, the very first kind of largest
Yeah.
Bitcoin exchange, blew up at the end of 2013.
Yeah.
And then all through 2014, the price kind of, was tumbling. And I got in, roughly a week or two before the final collapse. So
Yeah.
just like almost everybody has that gets into Bitcoin
Oh
has this
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
experience
Yeah.
where you buy a
Yeah.
little bit, and
Yeah.
I was nervous. I wasn't like moving my entire life savings in at the beginning. It was, hey, maybe I'll just buy a little bit.
Yeah.
But um I bought it and I was so excited, and then literally the next week the price collapsed by about 60%.
Yeah.
So it went from, $475 to something like $180
Yeah.
for a moment there. And then it hovered around 200 to $250 for almost 2 years after that. So I think
Yeah.
2015, 2016, it was very muted, right? The price was
Yeah.
very muted. It was, in a lot of people's minds, it was dead. It was not coming back. But
It was just
I
after the
kept.
Silk Road too. I remember because I looked at Bitcoin. I was told about Bitcoin in 2009, 2010 in
Mhm.
LA. There were these same thing, nerd groups, tech entrepreneurs though, like so who, very, very accomplished older tech entrepreneurs talking about new money. But I just didn't understand. I was too young for that. And then 2013, same thing around the Silk Road. Actually, that was when the story broke. And I think Bitcoin was around 200, 250, and Litecoin was around 10, $20 maybe. So around the
Mhm.
same time as you. Yeah. But I didn't fully see the vision, honestly. So you saw it. You saw it earlier.
Well, yeah, and I think the reason that I was able to get it earlier is I think a lot of people, to your point early on, there was kind of two approaches to Bitcoin. People were
Yeah.
coming in who were deeply, deeply libertarian, and then
Yeah.
there were people
Yeah.
who were coming in as, hey, this is a technical experiment, and this is really
Yep.
cool. And
Yep.
I think for me, I came in, from the history of money and more of the economics of it,
Yep.
and
Yep.
that's what helped me with my early understanding and conviction. And that's why, when I teach people about Bitcoin, I really try to start with the economic argument for it, and I
Yep.
really don't. Maybe on the third or fourth conversation is when I start really going down the technicals. But I think
Yep.
what I see a lot of times is when people are explaining Bitcoin to folks, that one of the early questions is, well, how is it created? And they get into mining, and then
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
lost
Oh yeah.
them. As soon as you start talking about, oh, there's blocks that come every 10 minutes, and
Yeah.
a certain amount that can fit in a block, it just like goes over people's heads. So I really
Yeah.
just try to try to start at a high level, like explaining money, why it's valuable,
Yeah.
and I really try to keep it simple when I introduce it, and yeah, from sound economic principles.
Yep. What's your view on, remember how many iterations it's gone through? Much fewer than ETH, the way it was presented to the world. It was digital gold, then it was no, actually it was money initially, and then it turned into the hook was this is gold, digital gold, finite. It's pristine. It's perfect. How do you think what's your view on how it's evolved over the years from 2008, 2009, the very early years to when you found it to now today?
Well, I think the fundamentals really haven't evolved. I think
Yeah.
the reason that it is valuable is it is a global neutral currency with a fixed supply of 21 million. And
Yeah.
as long as the fixed supply of 21 million has a credible monetary property and is upheld uh, forever, then it will continue to just absorb capital and become the world's currency. So I don't think that that has really changed. Now, what's interesting about Bitcoin, right, is there isn't, a centralized kind of marketing department or like a foundation. There's been a few foundations throughout its history, but I wouldn't say
Yeah.
that they ever really had much sway over the direction. And I think there were a few attempts early on. I think about Roger Ver and his
Yeah.
approach to getting people on board, where it was going out and getting merchants to adopt it. There's more of the Andreas Antonopoulos approach, which I found early on, and kind of talking about it from the revolutionary perspective and a little
Yeah.
bit more of the economics. Um, but yeah, I think different as different waves of people start adopting Bitcoin, there are different messages that are resonating, and what I'm noticing
Yeah.
is over time, as a larger and larger swath of people get onboarded and start using it, there's different narratives that have worked a little bit better. Now I think I compare that to Ethereum, where there was a very clear founding team,
Yeah.
and then there's the Ethereum Foundation, which still holds a ton of ETH, and they really have pushed out in a lot of ways the messaging that
Yeah.
I've found. So it started out as a world computer, and then it transitioned to a DeFi platform, and the narrative has evolved a bunch of times, and then in addition, the underlying functionality and tech has evolved many times. So
Yeah.
the move there's been many Ethereum forks that have changed the monetary policy. There's been multiple Ethereum forks that have changed the functioning of Ethereum, right? So it moved from proof of work to proof of stake, um, and uh, and there is a roadmap. So with Bitcoin,
Yeah.
since nobody is really in charge, it is incredibly neutral and is increasing in decentralization over time. Nobody like rallies around a narrative or a roadmap. It's
Yeah.
just that all of these narratives just pop up over time, and some of them work for some audiences, some of them don't work for those audiences. But yeah, I think I was talking to a friend about this, and you really have to figure out the type of person that you're talking to and what they
Yeah.
really care about. And there is essentially like a funnel to getting them into Bitcoin,
It's
right? So
marketing. It's this is the product, and
exactly.
how do we present it to this buyer or this prospect in front of me? No, I fully
Exactly.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I was more of maybe slightly libertarian, but more like
Yeah.
economics and tech. And so it was the right time for me to understand it back then. Now, there's so much content out there that you can do like an introductory course for
Yeah.
Bitcoin for people who really deeply care about the environment, right?
Yeah.
Who are super conservative, make America great
Mm.
again, Trump supporters. There's
Yeah.
there's nonprofit organizations that focus on the left, the progressive side, and
Yeah.
why it's good for equality and so on and so forth. It's really just meeting meeting the person where they're at, and
Yeah.
and yeah, just gently introducing concepts that I think are important.
Yeah. What's working the best today? Like of those, if we call them marketing hooks, like angles, big ideas, what's when you talk to companies, and we'll get to that, startups, companies, publicly listed companies, what's resonating the most with for them?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about companies,
Yeah.
I think Michael Saylor's approach is just absolutely correct. It is, hey, it's a recognition that for many companies, especially in the U.S., like publicly traded or not, they're noticing with the rise of inflation and the devaluation of the dollar that their business, while it's profitable, is not actually growing, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
money is just becoming a melting ice cube. It's worth
Yeah.
less. So that approach, I mean, has been wildly effective. If you look at the rise of the Bitcoin Treasury companies over the last, I would say, even 5 or 6 months, it seems like they're all just kind of springing up right now.
Yeah.
Um, it's it's a recognition for a lot of these companies that they really need to make a big move, a big decision. Otherwise, they'll go out of business. So it's like a life raft or a preservation move.
Yeah.
Um, for the largest companies, I don't think they're there yet, right? They're still the ones that are making up most of the performance of the S&P 500, for example. But
Yeah.
it's it's really finding those companies that recognize that what they're doing for some reason isn't working, and then helping them to understand that the reason that it's not working is because they're saving in the wrong currency. They should be saving in Bitcoin, which is a hard money that
Yeah.
will increase in value over time as adoption grows.
Yeah, what's the sweet spot? Because I mean one of the biggest things is everyone's waiting for Google and Apple to buy, right? What's the sweet spot? I was actually having this conversation the other day with a friend. Is it the $1 to $5 million a year companies? Is it the 5 to 10s? Is it the 20 to 50 million a year in revenue? Like what are you seeing? What segment is the most open today? Or is it more of the demographic of the owner?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because I've worked with companies that are sole proprietorships, and
Yeah,
I've worked with companies that have are large publicly traded companies. And I think it really depends. So, if you think about a marketing funnel, right? Like the way to get this type of change to happen, you have to find the Bitcoiner at the organization. Um,
yeah,
it's really hard and uh, typically not worth it to just go out and like hand out flyers about Bitcoin to
cold.
these
Yeah,
large
yeah, yeah,
organizations.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, hey, find the advocate on the inside that is the Bitcoiner. And yeah, I think really what's been kind of cool about Bitcoin in a lot of ways is that the individual finds it first. It becomes
Yeah.
part of their investment and savings ethos. And then if they're a business owner, they of course want their business to be benefiting from the growth of Bitcoin as well.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it's so cool. It's like I've worked with just the gamut of companies. I haven't had success yet with the mega enterprises, but
Yep.
I think it'll come. I don't. I think
Yep.
it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I mean, from the conversations I've had, it's really like selling a B2B software to a company, right? If you sell to a Fortune 100, you're like the sales cycle is just 6 to 24 months.
Totally.
Whereas if you talk to an SMB owner, that's why I mentioned all these different segments, they can make a decision in 2 hours.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
What's so cool about my time at Unchained and just working in the industry and being in Bitcoin for so long is I I know a bunch of businesses that front ran Michael Saylor and
yeah,
MicroStrategy by years, right? I
yeah,
I helped them establish their Bitcoin treasuries before the mega whales of
yeah,
today were even thinking about Bitcoin. And yeah, their businesses are doing great now, of course.
yeah.
If they're
Oh,
able
they're
to
happy
preserve,
if they started years ago
yeah,
stacking BTC, saving in
exactly.
BTC. Yeah.
But the other thing to think about is if they're not, if you're working with somebody or a business on getting them to start considering Bitcoin, if they're not ready
Mm,
and they get Bitcoin and the price tanks, maybe
yeah.
they don't understand the fundamentals, or they this perception of Bitcoin as like this super risky asset still really lingers. I think it's been pushed via most of the
Yeah.
traditional economists and big banks and governments and so on. Um, and that idea still persists really heavily for I think a lot of the general population. Like this is an extremely risky vehicle, and it's my
Yeah.
view that it's not risky even slightly. It's volatile.
Yeah.
Volatility, I think, traditionally is viewed as risk, but
Yeah.
if you understand why it's volatile and how it works, I don't view Bitcoin as risky at all. I view, in a lot of ways, like index funds and stock market and so on to be significantly riskier because
Yeah.
a lot of these companies could at any minute go out of business, and yeah, the dollar, the exposure to the dollar is extremely risky because it's guaranteed to decrease in value. Like the
Yep.
dollar is going to continue to decrease in value. That is a known.
Yep.
Whereas Bitcoin, there's no guarantee it'll increase in value, but as long as it holds its fixed supply of 21 million and more people adopt it,
Yep.
it will continue to go up in value.
Yep. Talking about these Bitcoin treasury companies, of course, Sailor and MicroStrategy, not just strategy. Metaplanet was probably the second biggest one in terms of like frequency of buys. And now in the
Yep.
last really 6 to 9 months, we've seen new smaller companies IPOing almost in a SPAC using the SPAC model going in and buying not $1 billion like Sailor does, but $1, $2, $3 million, sometimes starting with $500,000. What's the process like? Because you're seeing this from like on a very granular level, right? How's it going? Like, the adoption, and also, you know, one of the questions I have is this a bubble, right? Because of course you can't keep tens of thousands of companies raising just for the sole purpose of BTC. That's the other side of the coin. So what's your view?
Oh man, there's so much going on there.
Yep.
I think my fundamental thesis when it comes to Bitcoin treasury companies is that investors like companies that make money,
Yep.
and Bitcoin is the best form of money. So my view is as long as they are adopting Bitcoin in a uh, conservative, I'll put that in
Sure.
quotes, manner,
Yep.
that it will continue to be a benefit for these companies. I don't think there's like the biggest losers in the corporate Bitcoin treasury adoption race are going to be the ones that wait too long to adopt
Yep.
Bitcoin, then they'll never
Yep.
be able to catch up. Like I think honestly, the ship has probably already sailed. I don't think
Mm,
anyone is going to necessarily catch up with strategy at
yeah.
600,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Maybe if one of the mega companies around the world starts aggressively
Yeah.
buying, they can catch up. But there's not that many Bitcoin. There's 21
Yeah.
million, and Sailor has 600,000 of them. But that said, I think because Bitcoin is the best form of money, investors like to invest in companies that make money.
Yeah.
Yeah, as every company that adopts Bitcoin is going to continue to see share prices increase, their balance sheet looking a lot healthier. Now, to your second point about the speculative bubbles, I also think that that is true. I think that there are going to be certain companies that their strategy is going to be a little bit overly aggressive
Yeah.
or overly exuberant. And I've seen many different cycles in Bitcoin, and in every cycle, there's people who get wiped out, right?
Yeah.
So I just think about 2017, it was the big ICO boom. I think a vast majority, if not all of those coins, have been wiped out. In 2021, it was kind of the Bitcoin collateralized lending and rehypothecation,
Yeah.
and the kind of DeFi boom. Many companies were wiped out there.
Yeah.
Bitcoin went into another kind of dark period. And then now, I agree with you. I think that the Bitcoin treasury company is the mania of this cycle. And yeah, I believe that some of them will get wiped out, but I think that most of them will actually stick around,
Yeah.
as long as they are being remotely conservative with their approach and not getting out over their skis, and recognizing that Bitcoin has been through many periods of 70, 80%, 85% drawdowns.
Yeah.
If they're planning for that, I think that they can weather the storm. I think it's the companies that don't plan for the next bear market will get wiped out.
Yeah.
But what's cool about Bitcoin too is all of this happens kind of at the margins, and it makes the overall health of the network stronger afterwards because Bitcoin is
Yeah.
anti-fragile. So even in the scenario where the 2021 markets where FTX and BlockFi blew up and crashed the price of Bitcoin by something like 85% or something,
Yeah.
um, I think that the overall network is significantly stronger and healthier now, because that type of lending and leverage
Yeah.
was wiped out of the industry, right? So
Yeah.
compare that to the US dollar or any other fiat currency where you start having these companies that become too big to fail, And when they make mistakes or they're overly aggressive or they're not paying attention, instead
Yep.
of getting wiped out and the market healing and learning, they're bailed out, and then this
Yep.
malinvestment and bad behavior essentially continues. So, I think that's where the volatility in Bitcoin comes, and that's where people
Yep.
think it's risky. Well, it's crashed a bunch of times, and all these businesses went out of business. And it's like, yeah, that's true, but if you understand why, then
Yep.
you can learn from that and change your behavior.
Hey, Matthias here, and if you're enjoying this and want access to even more alpha, early stage deals and opportunities, and also behind the scenes insights on the markets, hit the link in the description and make sure you're subscribed. It's free and it puts you ahead of the curve. Let's get back to the show. What's your view and the difference between companies raising, so different ways, right? Debt, the revenue generating companies, right? Sale
Yep.
actually has a company that makes money, right? A lot of these businesses actually do make money. And so there is something. And versus some of the more recent ones, smaller ones that essentially have 99% of, of the company just pure, it's a pure Bitcoin treasury play with no real business behind it. How does that play out? Like, what will happen to those? What's your view on that?
I think those are the ones that are going to be most at risk
Yeah,
of, collapsing at the end of the day. Like if they don't have anything to fall back on
yeah,
beyond the fact that they're buying Bitcoin and, in giving access to Bitcoin to different markets. I think that those are the riskiest ones. But that said, I think there's a lot of pools of capital out there that are
mm,
really hungry for exposure to Bitcoin that
yeah,
cannot get exposure to Bitcoin. And that's what Strategy and Sailor have done so beautifully. And he even had that chart. I don't know if you saw it the other day, but it showed the demand for spot Bitcoin is something like $900 billion
yeah,
of capital. And then the demand for like credit and bonds or something
yeah,
was like 30 times the amount
yeah,
of capital. And so every company that is internalizing that and trying to give exposure to Bitcoin to those different markets, I think, it's just still really early days. And I think almost all of them will be successful. Um, again,
yeah,
it's just about being mostly conservative. You spoke earlier about MetaPlanet. I think that's a great example. They had a profitable, I believe, profitable business before
yeah,
adopting Bitcoin. But if you look at their product now, it is exactly the same as Strategy, but just in the Japanese market. It is give
yeah,
exposure to Bitcoin to as many different pools of capital as possible, as quickly as possible, and use that to buy Bitcoin. Um, so yeah, I think really this cycle is just defined by the Bitcoin black hole
yeah,
entering Wall Street and then Wall Street just getting sucked into it.
yeah,
I think a lot of people are like, oh, Bitcoin. They'll look at it as like Bitcoin has sold out its values, and now the bankers and blah 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 are adopting Bitcoin.
yeah,
And I actually think of it completely the other way around. It's that before, everybody who wanted to get exposure to Bitcoin was legally prevented from getting exposure, and then now that there are these different options for them, they've been caught in the Bitcoin event horizon, and they're going to be sucked into the Bitcoin black hole. So I think it's amazing to watch. To
yeah,
me, it's not quite as exciting, I think, as the other cycles where it was more of a battle of like, hey, is Bitcoin versus all these other cryptocurrencies? Is it,
yeah,
what are these ICOs? Is DeFi a thing? That I thought was a little bit um, more exciting to me personally. But
yeah,
I mean, the pools of capital that are just dipping their toes in right now to Bitcoin is like just orders of magnitude
yeah,
larger than anything that has happened in the past. So that's pretty cool to watch.
yeah. Can you talk about why? Like why? Because a lot of people don't know that companies can't, some companies cannot buy Bitcoin. They have to go through well, the strategies, right? The meta planet. So why is that?
Well, I wouldn't consider myself a finance expert, but I can do my best layman's description. Um, there are funds that are established, like credit funds or capital, market funds that are established with very specific like legal mandates of like, hey, you have to invest in 10% of this, 20% of that, so on and so forth.
Yeah,
And before the Bitcoin ETF and before all these different financial products that tap into the bond market and the credit market and so on. Those funds, like a pension fund, for example, they have very
Yeah.
specific rules about what they can and cannot invest in. They really couldn't easily get exposure to Bitcoin because I don't think they were able to uh, legally buy spot Bitcoin. And I think that this is all
Yeah.
what kind of uh, where the role of fiduciaries come into play and the role of the regulations come into play. And there's all kinds of rules. I think that mostly sprouted up in the last 20, 30 years, just after the different financial crises that happened. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah.
And again, I wouldn't consider myself a finance expert, but yeah, they have all these different kind of investment mandates that they're required to follow, and Bitcoin as an asset or as a commodity just never fit under those investment mandates until these different financialized products existed.
Yeah. In terms of adoption, are we looking at a situation where there's 50 companies per country, 100, 500 companies that do the treasury play, the Bitcoin treasury reserve play? What's your view on this? Or is it going to be the 2 to 3 big plays? Metaplanet, of course, is the Japanese strategy. Do
Yep.
you think it really permeates and we see 100 different plays basically per country?
Yes, I see
Mm.
this happening in every country. So, just going back to the very basics, it's my view that Bitcoin is the best form of money.
Yeah.
And as the knowledge of Bitcoin's absolute scarcity and its properties expands, it will become the global reserve currency. So yes, my view is that every country is going to have their own version of strategy. Um, I believe that everybody, as long as they're connected to the internet, will at some point become a Bitcoin user in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
So yeah, every company, every person, everybody needs good money. That's something that we all around the globe share in common, is that we
Yeah.
have a need to be able to preserve our wealth. We go out every day, we work on helping people, serving people, and as a reward, we're paid in money. But under the fiat currency regime, we then, that money is just losing value. So you have to
Yeah.
like go out and spend it again and invest it, and then you're taxed on that and so on and so forth. What's amazing about Bitcoin is it just simplifies all that, right? You go out, you do
Yeah.
your job, you save in a good form of money, prices drop around you. So houses get more affordable,
Yeah.
healthcare gets more affordable, groceries get more affordable. And yeah, I think that that will deliver prosperity to 8 billion people. So that's a roundabout way of saying that, yes, I
Yeah.
think that every company is going to need to save in Bitcoin if they want to
Yeah.
continue to be competitive. I think there will be, the kind of strategy in every single capital market around the world, because there are these types of regulations and investment mandates that exist
Yeah.
in most of the markets that I'm aware of. And yeah, it's cool to see that all develop. Now, one
Yeah.
thing I thought of as I was saying all this is maybe one thing that is very different about this adoption cycle in Bitcoin is I actually don't see retail paying attention at all right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Like there are
Why is that,
major,
by the way? Because retail isn't here. I mean, we talk about this
yeah,
almost on every show. It's surprising why yesterday all-time highs or close to all-time highs. ETH, doing well too. So why?
the sentiment I get from most people I talk to, and I try to just very subtly, introduce, oh, when people ask me what I do, oh,
Yeah.
I work in Bitcoin financial services. I help folks learn about it. And the sentiment right now is, oh man, I wish I bought Bitcoin a while ago. It's feeling like they missed out.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is unit bias.
Yeah.
$112,000 Bitcoin is out of reach for most people in the world, probably.
Yeah.
Actually, definitely, it's out of reach for most people in the world. And they think that, hey, if I can't get one, then I've missed my chance.
Yeah.
What is interesting about the Bitcoinification of Wall Street, I was going to say the
Yeah.
Wall Streetification of Bitcoin, but I'm going to say it the other way.
Yeah.
The Bitcoinification of Wall Street is that a lot of these folks are thankfully getting exposure to Bitcoin without even being aware, right? So
Yeah.
when they're investing passively in index funds, now more and more companies that are part of that index fund have exposure to Bitcoin. A lot of the different funds are starting to include exposure to the Bitcoin ETFs and so on. So that brings me hope that even if the
Yeah.
individual isn't like going out and smash buying Bitcoin or DCAing or whatever, they're still in their portfolio gaining exposure, whether or not they're aware of it. So um, my grandmother-in-law was a Wisconsin teacher, right?
Yep.
She's 90 years old, and now she has exposure to Bitcoin in her Wisconsin pension, right? Because the
Yep.
Wisconsin pension invested in Bitcoin. Uh, and it's funny, I think they revised early on, they said they were going to buy like 1% of their portfolio in Bitcoin. And I think they've since kind of ratcheted it up a little bit. It's funny how
Yep.
that happens.
Yep.
Happened to me as well. I'll just dip my toes in. And then as soon as you
Yep.
get exposure, you start dialing it up. But anyways, I think the demand right now from retail for spot Bitcoin is, the volumes are good, but they're not
Yep.
what I would expect them to be. And I think right now all the attention is kind of going to these corporate treasuries and large corporations that are adopting Bitcoin.
Yep. What's your view on pure price action? And this is not the last question of the show because I have to ask this question about your price prediction, NFA. But why are we seeing these companies, Bitcoin treasury companies buying, strategy buying, Metaplanet buying? And we're still between the 95 to 110. We've been chopping for months now. Why? That's something that I know you see on Twitter. A lot of people are frustrated. If all these companies are buying and the supply, we know this supply is literally at an all-time low. Why are we not at 140, 150 plus?
The one thing that I've learned about Bitcoin throughout my time holding it and learning about it is that it never does exactly what I anticipate it will do in
Yep.
the immediate term. I'm like the absolute worst trader. Anytime I've tried to trade, I have lost Bitcoin. So all I do is
Yep.
just buy and hold, and I've learned a new form of patience. And Bitcoin rips when you least expect it. It crashes when you least expect it. It's just like pure market dynamics. Now, I think um, one of the on-chain metrics that I continue to go back to is the HODL waves. So Unchained
Yep.
co-founder Drew Bonsall popularized the HODL waves back in like 2018, maybe 2017. And the HODL waves show, so since Bitcoin has a public blockchain, like all the addresses and balances
Yep.
are public, but you can also see how long those Bitcoin have been sitting in those addresses without moving. So the HODL waves is an amazing visualization of all
Mm.
of the Bitcoin that exists, in the blockchain
Yep.
and how long the Bitcoin has been sitting there. And so I like to look at that. And if you look at it right now, I pulled it up the other day after that person moved 80,000 Bitcoin
Yep.
on chain in a day, to try to see like, okay, can I see in the HODL waves like where that was moved? And I wasn't able to see it the other day. I'll probably pull it up after the show to take a look.
Yep.
But if you look at the HODL waves, what you can see right now is that the longer term hodlers really aren't transacting all that much. Like some of the
Yep.
bands are kind of condensing, but if you look at kind of the bands of the longest held Bitcoin, those are still continuing to expand.
Mm.
So it's a long-winded explanation to say like I'm not sure where it's going to go, but I'm a perma bull, so I do
Yep.
think that we just touched a new all-time high yesterday,
Yep.
and it seems like it's kind of like hovering around there. And if I had to place a bet, I would say that we're going to go up. And I think we'll go up faster than a lot of people anticipate because, to your
Mm.
point, Bitcoin on exchanges is nearing an all time low.
Yep.
Um, the HODL waves look like not many people are moving significant chunks of Bitcoin. And these companies are accumulating significantly more Bitcoin than is being introduced into the
Yep.
market via mining. So it's just a matter of time.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'm not selling. I'm not
Yep.
trading. It's been my approach for many years at this point, and I think I just kind of became like ride or die hodler, and it's been a great financial
It's been a
decision for
good
me.
strategy. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
I don't have any like supercomputers to give me an edge over the other traders, and so
Yep.
my edge is being unpredictable and just buying as much Bitcoin as I possibly can.
Yep. When it comes, so shifting gears to Unchained,
Mhm.
and Bitcoin custody. You mentioned before the show all the different forms of custody. We can talk about that. So, I think one of the ways that people initially, especially retail, right? They comes in, they they probably read the slogan, not your keys, not your keys, not your coins, and all that, and you need to put your Bitcoin in a hardware wallet. But it is limited, right? So you mentioned right before the show, we can talk about all the different ways of custodying. So what are those ways, and what can retail do, and what have you seen being done? Because you were really there when everything was getting built up.
One of the biggest risks today to Bitcoin, in my view, is the centralization of coins at custodians. So, due to the Bitcoinification of Wall Street, and the very strict regulations that Wall Street operates under, there are very few custodians that really qualify for them to be able to store their coins.
Yep.
As a result,
So
what
to
that
hold
means
coins
is
on behalf of someone else.
that's right.
Yeah.
Typically, they're required to be a qualified custodian, which is a very tough legal regulation to
Yeah.
achieve. And then the companies that have become qualified custodians are typically not Bitcoin native.
Yeah.
And so they're learning Bitcoin custody. And in the past, there's been many, qualified custodians that while they achieve those regulatory check
Mm,
boxes, were not proficient at Bitcoin and ended up, going out of business. I think the most famous example is Prime Trust, which collapsed, I believe, in 2022, 2023.
yeah.
They made some mistakes with the custody, and ended up going out of business. So
Yeah.
trust companies, I don't think typically go out of business much in TradFi, but
Yeah.
Bitcoin does not work the same way as the US dollar. So the biggest risk I see is, yes, the centralization of custody. And the reason that that's a problem is because, I'll pick on Coinbase because they're the largest.
Yeah.
Coinbase now holds close to something like 2 million Bitcoin. That
Yeah.
is maybe the largest bounty that has ever existed
Oh yeah.
for attackers. And all Bitcoin, all 21 million Bitcoin, are controlled by keys. Now, you have the option. You can control the keys, or you can have some other, company or entity control keys for you. But fundamentally, Coinbase controlling the keys to Bitcoin is exactly the same as using a hardware wallet to control the keys to your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Now, Coinbase, they're great. They have done really well. They're growing. They're almost certainly very secure, but this is a problem that just continues to get larger and larger, and the bounty continues to get bigger and bigger. And so I
Yeah.
do think that that is a huge risk. And I think something like 8 of the 11 Bitcoin ETFs use Coinbase as custody. So
Yeah.
what's amazing about Bitcoin is, as I mentioned, it works very differently than the US dollar. So there's a multiple different ways to custody the coins. There's single signature self custody, which, to your point, by a hardware wallet, one key controls your addresses.
Yeah.
That works for some people, but it's also very scary because it's a single point of failure, right?
Yeah.
You lose your seed phrase, or if your seed phrase is taken, and somebody loads up those seed phrases on another device or another software wallet, they have control of the Bitcoin. That is the key to the Bitcoin. That's scary. So a lot of people will try adding a passphrase. That's a good maybe layer of security, but a passphrase is very different than a password. If you forget a
Mm,
password to your bank account, you can just reset it. If you forget a passphrase to your key, you
yep.
now no longer have your key. The passphrase becomes another critical point of failure, and it is case sensitive. You can enter spaces. Um, you can accidentally enter a passphrase when you think you're entering a PIN, so on and so
Yep.
forth. There's lots of ways to kind of shoot yourself in the foot with passphrases. At Unchained, I recently departed Unchained, but during my time there, I helped educate people on how to use multi-signature. So
Yep.
when you think of multi-signature, I think of like a Bitcoin address as like a safety deposit box, right? A single sig Bitcoin address is a safety deposit box with one key that is required to unlock it. A
Yep.
multi sig address is like a safety deposit box with multiple locks and multiple keys that are required to unlock it. So Unchained helps clients with 2 of 3 multi sig. Unchained holds a key, clients hold 2 keys. Two out
Yep.
of 3 keys are required to unlock the Bitcoin and spend it. This sounds a little more complicated, but I think in practice, it's actually relatively simple. A lot of people who do self custody end up buying multiple hardware wallets because of this whole single point of failure problem. And they
Yep.
put, I'm going to put some Bitcoin in this hardware wallet, some Bitcoin in that hardware wallet. But that single point of failure problem exists now twice. So now you have two
Yeah.
single points of failure where if one of your seed phrases is lost, you've lost a portion of your Bitcoin. Another seed phrase is lost, you lost another portion of your Bitcoin. What's cool about multi-sig is that you can, use multiple devices. So you don't have to buy any more hardware wallets. If you're already using them, you already have hardware wallets.
Yeah.
And you can deposit Bitcoin into those addresses. And now your hardware wallets and seed phrases, none of them are single points of failure by themselves. If somebody gets a seed phrase or gets your hardware wallet, they actually don't have the ability to spend your Bitcoin because it requires
Yeah.
multiple keys. And in addition, they won't have the ability to just find the Bitcoin very easily. So I mentioned earlier, if you have a single SIG wallet and somebody gets your seed phrase, if they load that seed phrase onto a hardware wallet, they have your Bitcoin. They can find it very easily and spend it. With
Yeah.
multi-sig, if they find a seed phrase, $5 wrench attack is the famous attack. Somebody comes
Yeah.
at you with $5 wrench, takes your hardware wallets and seed phrases. If you load them up onto a new device or using just a typical software, you won't even find the Bitcoin. It'll show a balance of zero, right? And that's because the Bitcoin it lives in a different address that was built differently and has different ways of spending.
Yep.
So it's my view that there's all these different methods of custody. There's all these different forms of self-custody or custodial. My view is that this multi-sig and collaborative custody model where you hire a key agent such as Unchained or Casa, or there's many other ones,
Yep.
hold a portion of your keys is actually the easiest way to secure Bitcoin for many years if you're treating Bitcoin as like your long-term savings. It's
Savings.
not going to
Yep.
be, it's not going to be the easiest way to custody Bitcoin if you are just playing around or trading with it or so on. But
Yep.
yeah, I think the idea of holding keys often scares people, but what they don't realize is that if you're not holding the keys, what you're really securing your Bitcoin with is your login information to your
Yep.
exchange. So say you're using a Coinbase, really the way that you're securing your Bitcoin is through your email. If somebody can get access to your email, there's
Yep.
been many, 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 many examples of this. If an attacker gets access to your email, they can social engineer their way into essentially any exchange. And these attackers are getting extremely sophisticated.
Yep.
I receive spam emails constantly trying to get me to
Yep.
download software, add seed phrases, and so on. But yeah, and your email is exposed to the internet 24/7. So you could be asleep, somebody could have access to your email, set up separate folders, and be messaging with your exchange to try to gain access while you're not even awake. What's cool
Yep.
about holding your own keys is uh, just like your car keys, you have them physically on you. Nobody via the internet can just take your money.
Yep. Yep.
So I don't know what the original question was, but I went on a
No,
long tangent there
all the
about the
different
different
ways.
custody
No, I
models.
think you covered a lot. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Is this something, and by the way, for all the listeners, we're not paid by Unchained. This is really just educational only. So this is not a sponsored video or episode. Is this, of course, this is more for B2B, right? Like the initial use, but is it also for, mom and pop type of people who hold
Yeah,
$5,000 in Bitcoin?
absolutely. Like I would say learning how to use multi-sig and potentially with collaborative custody is worth it when you feel like you have an amount of Bitcoin that you can't afford to lose, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to be different for everybody. Um, and yeah, I spent the last 6 years with Unchained. I'm no longer with Unchained, but I'm always happy to talk about it. And
Yep.
I love the company dearly and the product dearly. But yeah, there's many different options, in the U.S. and then internationally that where you can hire essentially a key agent to have one key on your behalf, and then you have
Yep.
a majority. So Unchained, Casa, Thea, Nunchuck. Um, oh, there's a bunch more too.
Yep.
But I'm blanking right now. But yeah, there's a lot of different options available, and it's definitely worth it. Again, if you're treating Bitcoin as your long-term savings, then
Yep.
what additionally is really cool about that is if you're working with a collaborative custody provider, oftentimes you can gain access to financial services that you would not necessarily be able to gain access to
Yep.
just custodying by yourself. So lending, trading, tax advantage accounts in the US. There's retirement accounts that where you can control your keys. There's um, you know charitable accounts. There's all kinds of really
Yeah.
cool tax advantage accounts that I know are going to be coming to the market soon.
Nice.
And so yeah, what's cool about collaborative custody, where you have a company holding a key, is that you can do all
Yep.
kinds of really cool financial products. And yes, it's for businesses, it's for mom and pop, it's um,
Nice.
it's for I use it with my family,
Yep.
and yeah, it's just a great way to make sure that there's no single critical point of failure in your security.
Yep.
So my home, my person, I have no ability to move the Bitcoin by myself, right? So
Yep.
I'm not a risk. My house is not a risk uh,
Yep.
to losing Bitcoin.
Yep. All right, we have about 5 minutes left. I'm curious to hear more about specifically, we talked about, of course, companies buying Bitcoin, but I know you work a lot with startups, different
Yeah.
profile, no revenue. How is the landscape today with these new products when it comes to startups and Bitcoin?
Well, since I departed Unchained about a month ago,
Yep.
yeah, I've been taking introductory calls and helping advise Bitcoin startups, Bitcoin nonprofits, and the depth of new products that are coming to market are just super interesting. So I mentioned tax advantage accounts.
Yep.
There are a few more tax advantage accounts that exist in the U.S. That haven't had kind of like a native Bitcoin option just yet, that are going to be coming to the market soon. There's also like really cool lending options
Yep.
that are a little bit more Bitcoin native than I think the ones that existed previously. So Unchained popularized like a collaborative custody based loan,
Yep.
two of three, where client holds one key, Unchained holds a key, third party holds the third key. You post your Bitcoin as collateral, you get dollars.
Hmm.
There's more options like that coming down the line that are kind of Bitcoin native. So
Yep.
they're in a way decentralized finance, but you're always just on the Bitcoin network. You're not using some kind of questionable
Yep.
token platform or centralized, decentralized uh, platform.
Yep.
But yeah, there's a lot of really cool developments coming down the line. There's auditing tools. There's yeah, just
Yep.
super excited about the future.
Yep. Are these most of the startups, are they targeting big corporations or more, is it more B2C, B2B or B2C? What are you seeing most?
Well, I've spoken. It's actually been like a pretty even blend so
Mm.
far. I've
Yep.
spoken to a few B2B companies. I've spoken to a few B2C companies. The yeah, a couple of nonprofit organizations that are doing some really
Yep.
cool things in the space. Um, and yeah, that's I think what's really exciting about it is it's not just pigeonholed into like, hey,
Yep.
we're building a new wallet or something like that. It's like,
Yep.
no, we're Bitcoinizing like this totally new segment of the market that hasn't been able to get exposure to spot Bitcoin before.
Yep. All right, last question. This is pure price action. The last
Sure.
question for the audience. Everyone wants to know 6 to 12 in the next 6 to 12 months, what is your prediction? How high or low? Let's start with a high first. Does Bitcoin go?
In the next 6 to 12 months,
Yep.
that's tough. So I've said this on a few shows before, but I think by 2030,
Yep.
Bitcoin will be the dominant global form of money. So what year is it? 25, 2025. So we have one
5 years.
more, yeah, two more halving cycles,
Yep.
where Bitcoin is a dominant form of money. So what that means, if you kind of break it down a little bit more, is Bitcoin certainly will go to $1 million. I don't know exactly when, but I
Yep.
was saying,
Yep.
Bitcoin's going to go to 100K before Bitcoin went to 100K.
Yep.
People
Yep.
were looking at me like, eh.
Yep.
But now I think it is at some point, as long as again the fundamentals remain true.
Yep.
Bitcoin has a fixed supply of 21 million and increases in decentralization over time, so remains neutral. Bitcoin will go to $1 million. 6 to 12 months, I cannot see a world where these companies with access to so much cheap capital buying this amount of Bitcoin don't cause the price of Bitcoin to uh, go up significantly faster than people anticipate.
Yep.
Getting to 100K and over 100K has not prevented these companies from adopting Bitcoin because the price is too high or whatever. It has actually
Yep.
accelerated it in a lot of ways. And for the biggest corporations to gain exposure to this asset, it probably needs to be worth more than $2 trillion overall, right? So
Yep. Yep.
a $5 trillion asset, or I think what gold is 10 trillion now,
Yep.
something like that,
8 to
15
10. Yeah. Yeah.
trillion,
Yeah. Yeah.
8 to 10 trillion. Like
Yep. I
once
believe.
Bitcoin's the size of
Let's
gold,
see.
they'll be able to really allocate to it, and
Yep.
like the Apple, the Facebook, and so on. So yeah, this is a kind of hand wavy explanation, but I would
Oh no,
by the end
22,
of the
20 estimated market cap of gold is 22.3 trillion.
wow, yeah.
Yeah, much,
So that's
much more. Yeah.
10x. That's
10x, that
10x
is
from
10x. Yeah, 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 yeah.
where Bitcoin is right now.
Yeah.
And I strongly believe that Bitcoin is worth significantly more than gold.
Yeah.
It's way more valuable of a tool and a savings tool because it is all of the positives of gold.
Yep.
Hard money, fixed supply, um, robust,
Yeah.
transferable, without any of the downsides, which is it's not physical. You don't have to
Yep. Carry
bury it
it.
under your
Yeah.
mattress or whatever. You
Yeah.
just send
Oh
it,
yeah.
wherever you want.
Yeah.
So 6 to 12 months, I don't think it's going to a million. I think I wouldn't be surprised if we get into the 200s.
Yep.
Um, I would
All right.
probably,
200K.
yeah, I would probably be like a little surprised if we got into the 3 or 400s, but I know at some
Yep.
point it will happen. It's just, yeah, I could see it. I could see it almost doubling
Yep.
before. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what this next bear market's going to be, but I think I don't.
Yep.
I think we have a ways to go before we hit the speculative mania.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, it was great talking today. The main thing I really wanted to get into these, this new, yeah, I'd say this new phenomenon of these Bitcoin treasury companies. So thank you for joining. I know you see this, really like in the trenches of these Bitcoin treasury companies. Definitely want to have you back later in the year when we'll have seen probably hundreds more of these companies just going to market to buy Bitcoin, and then we'll do a recap. So thank you, Phil, for being on the show. And we will link all resources around here, anything you mentioned. And yeah, we'll definitely have you back. Thank you for being on the
All
show.
right, yeah, and thanks for having me. And for your listeners, if you're interested in following me or connecting with me, you can
Yep.
follow me on X at Phil_Geiger.
Yep. And we'll link the Twitter too.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll talk to you next time. Hey, thanks for watching. If you got value from this episode, you're going to love what's coming next. So subscribe now. We drop new episodes and videos several times a week featuring power players, market movers, and insiders from the financial world. And if you want access to deals and insights we only share privately, hit the links in the description and we'll see you on the next show.